My name's Julie Timbrell, and I'm from New Putney Debates. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this festival and where it came from. So my background is from Occupy. New Putney Debates came out of Occupy, and Peter spoke before about one of the principles being assembly, and I think that's really important. And when we gathered here, we spoke about the possibility of getting in a circle, which is what we did at Occupy. We got into a circle, and we met many people from different backgrounds, and we started to create a sort of a political commons, really, and to examine some of the crises that brought us there, the 1%, the collapse of the economic system. But for many of us there, a key issue was the environment, and that's where I found out about some really exciting ideas about how to protect all creatures, which the woman at the back brought up, which is central to me and central to my sort of love that I've grown about the Charter of the Forest as well, which to me is why I want to look, why it's inspired me and for us to do this festival is also about looking forward to the future, because the Charter of the Forest was a constitution, and constitutions to me are about our souls. Peter said it was for the future of our souls, and Aristotle said that constitutions are the DNAs of, they're about the soul of the and the body of the nation. So I think that we've lost our way with our constitution in this country. It's unwritten, or it's in lots of different documents. But to me, what I have learned is that it seems to me that the guiding goals of civilization at the moment and our country is growth and economic growth. And that seems all wrong to me. And the very beginning of the preamble of the Charter of the Forest talks about for the good of the Commonwealth. And I think that's important. And the other thing about for our souls and the generation that comes before us. I'm a grandmother. I really care about my grandchild. And I want, the poem I heard earlier in Sherwood, that made me cry, because I want my grandchildren to have a future in the forest. I think we all do. So we've been hearing from some inspiring movements as well in the course of this. So we've been hearing about what's been happening in the world, where people in places like South America, in Ecuador, have actually taken on corporations and stopped them ravaging their natural, have stopped the poisoning, have stopped them taking out mountains. And they've done things by going back to their history, to their indigenous roots. And one of the concepts that they have is Mother Nature, Pachamama. And in their constitutions, they have rights for nature. So we heard from someone from Ecuador who spoke about that. And on a boat trip, down to Anchor Wick, which has this amazing tree. And we also heard about a concept that they have called Summit Quasi, which is how they frame their constitution, and that it's the idea of the good life. It's not economic growth, it's not profit, it's not property, but it's the good life. And I think that's really important, and that really inspired me. So those are the kind of things that we've been looking at. The other thing we've been trying to work on, and we've been hearing from Guy Shrubsall, who's been helping to organise this, is a website that he's done, which, do check this out. It's called Who Owns Britain? And you can see the facts of the dukes that still own this, who are the barons, and also more recently the oligarchs who have been buying up the property. If you come from the city, you'll probably see how much is actually owned is in tax havens. It's a really good website and gives lots of great stories, as well as having a map from the private eye. So one of the things we're calling for is a new doomsday book, so that we can start to call for a better understanding of who owns the land. And to explore new ways that have been around for a long time, things like land value tax, that we might share the land better and bring it back into more productive use, and so that it isn't so intensely owned. The other thing that we've been thinking about is governing the commons and as Guy said, a Charter of the Commons. And I think I have been really inspired by how many of the movements against fracking have brought people together and created something else. So in Balcombe, from Occupy, many of us went down to Balcombe. Many people I see here, Daniel and Arthur, we went down there and we supported that local community to fight against fracking, and we won. We went down there and we helped. I mean, there was many of us who went down there and camped and put our bodies in the line and did all the things I know you're doing here, and out of that became something else. They set up a community energy company. So they got together and they created something new. And I think that's something that can come out of these struggles. There's a sort of know me kind of shock doctrine that actually the 1% will take advantage of when crises happen. But we can do that. We can use these crises to build community and build alternatives, I think. And the other thing that's really inspired me in terms of people doing things differently and that we have been exploring is what's been happening in Frome, which is where I don't know how many of you, some of you will know about that, I know, but others maybe do look it up. So it's where a local community from a small town decided that they were so they'd had enough of how the political parties were running their town, and they decided to get together and start running their town themselves, and to do it with a local participative way of doing it. And they first got 10 people to represent them, and they all chose their representatives together, and they meet and they plan out how to do services together. And rather than doing austerity and selling things off, they're actually buying land and creating houses, and that's really inspiring. And there's a brilliant book called DIY Democracy, and there are other towns doing it in Devon as well. So at different places where people are finding different ways to assemble and come together. So I think there's some really exciting possibilities out there. The same thing is happening in Barcelona, where groups have come together and they're starting to create different types of commons. So these are all examples, I think, for our own Charter of the Commons. I would like to see rights for nature, but also ways that we can actually participate in new types of democracy, direct democracy, come together. And I think that these moments provide opportunities for us to redo that. I think that's probably all I was going to say, apart from one thing, just about the Charter of the Forest. There was a question earlier about where it came from. And I think you can trace Robin Hood's legends back to that time. And it was Guy Standing who told me some time ago that actually one of the provisions in the Magna Carta was actually to get rid of the Sheriff of Nottingham, one of the very early provisions. So that's evidence of this. The other thing that I know is that although the Charter was granted in 1217, surprise, surprise, it was left off on the statute and nothing much happened. And it only started to move when local people decided to get up and do their own perambulations and claim that they wanted the forest back, because that was one of the provisions, that they wanted that forest back, and they decided to just start doing these perambulations. And it was the people in Nottingham who did that a number of times, and that was one of the things that reclaimed that enacted the rights that were given to them. So I think it is always direct action that is so important, and finding those ways to work together.